and welcome again to the Executive Room podcast, where we delve deep into the minds of remarkable executives who have shaped the business world with their ideas and actions. I'm your host, Kimberly Afonso, CEO and founder of the KA Consulting Group. We are visibility partners to today's most influential CEOs, founders, and C-suite executives. I'm really excited to have Ryan Lewis join us today. Ryan Lewis is the CEO of Rancher Government Solutions, bringing deep expertise at the intersection of AI, national security, and open source technologies. He has a background spanning engineering, product development, and leadership, and brings a systems level view to solving complex government infrastructure challenges. Under his direction, RGS is helping agencies securely scale AI and modernize through containerized production-ready solutions that bridge cutting-edge innovation with real-world deployment. So let's get started. Ryan, you've built a remarkable career, at the intersection of AI, national security, open source infrastructure. You're leading now RGS through its next phase of growth. And I'd love for you to walk us through a little bit your journey and how it's led to the work you're doing today.
Absolutely. And first, thanks again, Kimberly, for the opportunity to be here today. And, I think from a career perspective, like has been mentioned on your show a couple of times, is that, when you're first getting started, you don't really realize it in the moment, but a lot of certainly my earlier experiences really help inform and prepare me for the role I'm in now. Right. So when, I came out of grad school, doing on-site work at the time. This is going to date me, but the era of big data was just getting underway, right? And agencies and different government organizations were just moving to the cloud. And the reason I kind of reference that is that's sort of the foundation for, how I look at supporting customers, because all these years later, right, watching both the trend from the compute perspective, right, in terms of what customers can do from an analytics side, as well as how they are leveraging infrastructure, whether it's on-prem or it's in the cloud. It's amazing how often, and I think this is true again for a lot of folks, that these you see previous lessons learned come full circle. And in today's environment, right, we work with customers, right, that are fully in the cloud, leveraging sort of next generation analytic applications. We're also helping them, customers that are fully hybrid, leveraging legacy compute platforms with some older applications, plus newer capabilities. And so for me to kind of be on all sides of it as someone that helped build those early systems, migrate them, and deploy them, given the fact that our product spans the gambit of that, I get to leverage a lot of lessons learned, even though I didn't really know I'd be drawing on some of those experiences, 15 years ago.
That's amazing. And I know one of your team's big strengths is containerizing applications so they can run securely everywhere or anywhere. And for those unfamiliar with DevOps or infrastructure management, can you explain what it means? And why is that such a game changer for rolling out new AI tools quickly?
Absolutely, right. And this is something kind of going back to, why experience here is so key. Even before sort of the latest generation of analytic applications is driving a lot of innovation, a major bottleneck, Kimberly, certainly from my whole career has been gaining secure access to the right type of compute infrastructure, regardless of whatever the use cases are, right? And what has supercharged that review process, or supercharged, right, the reassessment of that, is that as you have newer technologies like certainly generative back models that are so rapidly iterating and able to call out a variety of different functions at a speed and dynamism that hasn't been seen before, it only draws more attention to how can those applications, securely access whatever they need to, and make updates dynamically at the speed in which the technology is moving, and most importantly, the customer's mission requires. And back to your core question, given that environment, your ability then for software to go through very secure scans and provide hardened images to whatever the compute plane is, whether that's again on-prem or in the cloud, that's where we come in, right? As that core infrastructure layer. And that's at a broader level, that is what has taken the whole Kubernetes initiative and really increased its priority tenfold, right, over a very short period of time. And so for now, customers or any sort of software application able to use us, right, streamlines the ability to deploy and maintain and access infrastructure anywhere where they're running, right? So as one goes, as the application capability goes, so do we. And this is something, back talking about, sort of the career here, this is something that I've lived on the other side of it, both in supporting applications and investing in them. I cannot tell you how many times, right, we've run into a situation where, you'll have an organization that wants to move quick or leverage some of the newest innovations. And the bottleneck becomes like, how can we, securely scan this? And how do we provision the right type of infrastructure where it doesn't slow down the core capability that's being pursued, right? So for me, it's exciting, right, to be in this role and join an already stellar team here at Rancher, because this is a problem that's sort of I've long engaged with, and it is particularly special to be a part of the solution right now.
And I'd love to hear now, Ryan, as you've mentioned that it can be difficult for B2B government organizations to modernize, especially when working with a mix of legacy systems or even outdated mobile devices. What are some of the biggest technical or operational blockers you see when it comes to deploying modern software, particularly in secure and regulated environments?
Yeah, absolutely, right. And I think one of the things, if you follow kind of the broader AI movement right now, is that there's probably not a week that goes by, at least in open press, where you'll talk about where the ROI is being realized or not, and how challenging it can be for organizations, particularly government, sometimes to move out of pilots. I think there are obviously several variables that are feeding that. One of it, put from the infrastructure perspective, one of those variables, right, is that complexity in this circumstance almost always scales logarithmically, not linearly, right? So as you have a confined set of users, and whatever the those users have a shared profile, maybe a more simplified compute or DevOps platform that's in place supporting that pilot, right? Those are things that you can kind of control, right? With some modicum of ease. Where that accelerates dramatically, right, is like any other software application. When you start adding a lot of different users with different needs, particularly given how new agent-based systems, right, can spin up or spin down a lot of other infrastructure, that blast radius for an IT team grows exponentially, right, with every new office or group. And so regardless of public or private sector deployment, right, a secure DevOps pipeline is an absolute necessity to make any of that possible. I think particularly in the public sector side, where you see maybe some more novel challenges there, is that given the type of environment that whatever the applications are, wherever they're running, you may have, right, very unique infrastructure or capabilities that have to be balanced. So if it's in an enterprise setting, you may have a balance of on-prem solutions plus a limited capacity in a cloud environment, or you may have a multi-cloud deployment where there's maybe not a capacity problem, but balancing between those different services and making sure that the admin teams that are deploying those apps have complete visibility. And then, as so often with so many public sector use cases, is that you also may have an edge circumstance where that application and its infrastructure must be provisioned like you would in an enterprise environment, but it also has to be able to run in complete isolated format. And this is the thing that is so, I think, for anyone, right, that attempts to serve the U.S. government via industry, right? That's one of the things that's so exciting, right, is to handle these diversity of challenges. But maybe back to that experience part with your first question, anyone entering in knows that to really impact right beyond pilot, whether you're on the app level or down at the infrastructure level as we are, you're going to encounter those types of challenges very quickly.
And I'd love to hear a little bit more about, the government cases. For example, defense tech is a really unique case. It mirrors other highly regulated industries like fintech or healthcare, but with even higher performance and security demands. So, what makes these defense tech deployments especially challenging, and how does Rancher support innovation in those environments?
Yeah, absolutely, right. It is, as someone that's focused on or at least been connected into the defense ecosystem for a majority of their career, it is really exciting, right, to see the increased focus and investment in the category because it's critical. I think to your point, as new entrants come in and as old late incumbents try to innovate further, right, there are a couple key things, right, that continue to always kind of raise their head. I think one of them I already sort of briefly mentioned, previously, which is there's just probably a more extreme diversity of use cases than what vendors would see, right, in any other category, right? And just in a singular analytic application, you may have to run in a completely air-gapped environment. You may have to run in a hybrid architecture, and you also may have to run in an edge use case. And each one of those end users and in those deployment scenarios may have different security requirements or subtly different needs, and they may need you to plug into a wide variety of other software capabilities. So each deployment kind of becomes its own sort of specialized use case, which can be very challenging, right? If the product and the associated services aren't tooled to address that out of the gate. Equally, right, and this is something that's always been the case, sort of in the federal market, but continues to accelerate, and rightly so, is that ensuring that these systems that are deploying, right, are not just leveraging the best in class, right, software development, but they're also doing so securely, right? And I think one of the topics that has continued to grow very quickly, and fortunately we've been at the forefront of this, is when you talk about end-to-end software, end-to-end visibility in your supply chain from a software perspective. This is something that is important, right, in other categories, but has increased prioritization, right, given some of the workloads, right, that we would be running, right, with different government programs, right? And so this is an additional level of scrutiny beyond just scans or making sure that we're compliant with whatever sort of the current security framework is, but even being able to drill into dynamic changes at the container level for a particular application or feature, right? That's something that, or that level of detail and dynamism, doing so in real time, is, I'm still surprised, right, in some ways that we are at that level. And again, it's an honor to be a part of that solution. And I think the kind of the third piece, which is incumbent just, I think, in reading a lot of the world news today, is just the rapid evolution of use cases, right? Like we're talking here primarily about AI applications that are driving a lot of the innovation demand for government end users, but that's not the only one, right? If you look at, for example, supporting advanced communications, right, through an SDR type platform, that's again, our Kubernetes or container-based approach has a critical play in that too. And so, as the whole industry and as the government is sort of innovating rapidly, right, and from a defense industrial perspective, we have to be able to service sort of a wide variety of use cases, whether it is cutting edge, right, on what we're talking about, an AI deployment or next gen comms, or it also has to be critical IT work, such as we're going to migrate legacy apps into a new environment or a new hybrid environment. And we want to make sure that all those apps are fully containerized. So you're talking about a pretty far range of diversity in terms of servicing the customer and meeting them where the mission's at. And that's both exciting because you have a lot of ways, right, to impact things, but also from a business perspective, we have to balance, right, where we're making key product developments and service offerings, and where maybe that we're not, depending on where we see the greatest demand and where we think, right, the overall tech is going.
Oh, yes, definitely. And I'd love now, Ryan, to talk about leadership. You were just talking about customers, and I think it's a great segue. We always talk about leadership on this show. And what I thought was really unique about your background is that you've seen every side of the problem. You've been an engineer, an investor, a CEO, and you've talked about the importance of staying focused on real impact. So, what advice would you give to other leaders on building solutions that really matter?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that if I had to oversimplify that message, and this is something I still tell myself, Kimberly, right? So I try to remain an active learner here, is that to be very precise or to focus on one or two core things that you're trying to do, even at a very young age. I had the benefit of having some very strong mentors and bosses. And one of the things that they directed me to do that I didn't fully recognize at the time, and I certainly do now, right, is when I was working with a specific customer on one particular technical product, I was encouraged to really attempt to master, right, that type of deployment and understand all the challenges and opportunities there were with that customer set. And that was something unique because anytime, right, as I was growing in my career, I was able to kind of lever back to that experience of understanding what it took to really have an impact and what that customer was trying to achieve, even if um, it was just a small part of a broader program. It was something that I grew from, right? And as I understood how to deploy one software package with one customer set, then an application, and a series of applications, and so on and so on and so on. And I think certainly now in this role, looking at how our entire product suite is being used by a diverse array of customers, I still try to keep, not just me, our whole team is maintaining that focus of what are the core KPIs, what are the core milestones with our customers, and not trying to solve everything in one deployment or even one major program, right? These major changes, right? Changing, if you think at the most macro level, how do we innovate or help U.S. government agencies innovate in the realm of national security or service provision through one of the civilian agencies? Those things don't happen overnight, right? And breaking down in tractable parts where we can learn and then iterate and grow in an aggregate fashion. It's so easy to do. It's so easy to say. It's so hard to do, right? And so even with major tech transformation, right, it starts with a roadmap and iterating from there. And I think that is, regardless of the size of the deployment or the complexity of it, those are sort of first principles that should not be forgotten.
I love that. And do you have any key core values or principles that, guide you and guide your team at Rancher?
Absolutely, right. And I think some of them derive from how we work with customers. So as I was mentioning, right, we have a lot of different ways, right, to interface with the agency, not just from like our technical products and services, but even the go to market. We can go direct, we can work with partners, we can be embedded, right? And if you think about just that complexity, right, one of the core tenets that we have is always, right, meet the customer where they're at, right? There is, especially in the era of how much things are changing, it's so tempting right now. I've lived this on a lot of different sides. It's so tempting, right, to want to try to hurry up and deploy, whatever the newest feature or capability is. But even just laying out early groundwork with them about what are some of the core challenges they have that we can build upon later, right? Is a core belief for us, and particularly given it should be for every company, and certainly right for what we do, right? I think the second part is a core tenet for us, right, is right being a true gold standard on security and compliance, right? We, by the nature again of what our product does, we're entrusted with very important, right, workloads across a wide variety of use cases. And so when we are going through our security scans, our compliance, our build cycle, right, that's something where the customers, right, should be able to look to us and say, yeah, you guys, you've not only done your homework, you've gone above and beyond, right? So just from that lens, those two tenets alone, right, touch every single project that we do, right? Whether it's an internal research project or something we're delivering for customers.
Those are incredible, pillars to lead by. Thank you for sharing them, Ryan. And, this podcast is all about vocal leadership. We talk about, that's why I invited you on, because I did see that you have had even more of a public presence in the recent years. And one thing I'd love for our audience to hear from you is about, you're a CEO in the national security space. At the K Consulting Group, I personally, with some of our clients, we've worked with and work with people who are doing defense or companies who are doing things that are really, really confidential. So I'd love for our audience to hear from you specifically. How do you decide what issues to speak out on, what to keep behind the scenes? What to share, what not to share from the company, and what guides you, and what advice do you have to anyone else? This is I'm sure, yourself, anyone dealing with a company that is doing confidential things, it's always more difficult, of course, to have a public presence. So what kind of guides your choices in terms of what to share and tone and timing?
Absolutely. And it's a really, Kimberly, it's a really timely question, because as we were talking about earlier, with the amount of new attention and excitement in the defense sector, both from development and investment, that's also led to a boom in more open discourse about what's happening in the industry, from not just from a technical perspective, but from a policy perspective. I think historically those conversations were happening always, but even if you wound the clock back 5, 10 years, I think a lot of people would have said those were more confined maybe to certainly think tank circles or other policy based circles. And that is a good thing, right? Because as uh, the industry seeks to innovate and evolve, right, and leverage, best in class commercial practices, right, to do that, right, then you have to contribute back to the industry, right? It's not just a take. There's also a give component, and I think certainly for us, a guiding principle, in terms of communication, right? And this is certainly something I've lived, in prior roles, right? That were providing technology or advice in the national security sector, as well. Is that speaking on technical trends and what are the implications for that, and what are even implications for policy, right? Just at a macro level. It doesn't even have to be something, it shouldn't be something that's just self-serving, right? That is important, right? Because given how much is changing in real time, there's no one singular expert or one singular opinion that is static, that is correct here. I think, take for example, like when I first really started uh, being more public, it was during my time at InQtel, we were doing more open source research and data science challenges, and I was always blown away, right, at how the amount of feedback we would get in views on blog posts about newest model implementations or how we were deploying it across our on-prem, and at that time we were primarily using AWS. And it was a way, right, for us to engage with the development community and with customers, because it wasn't presented as here's the answer, but here's all the things we're learning. And I think one of the things, right, certainly that we have prioritized in terms of communicating uh, at RGS has been, here's a workshop moment. Here's the things we're learning. Here are new product features. Here's why we did it. Here's why it's valuable. These are all learnings that are things that we have unique insights into, and that, I hope, and we have good feedback from this, where whether it's a customer or an industry partner, they get to see that, and it helps inform some of the things that they're working on too, right? Because the speed of change in this industry is not going to dissipate; it's going to accelerate. And if we're not sort of openly communicating about some of our learnings, I think it could be a setback. I think on the confidential side, right? Those are certainly not things that we're openly talking about, or should we? But right, some of the changes on product and things like that, those are all good learnings and feedback that we can take both internally to our own research efforts as well as to the customer.
I love that. And I think it highlights that there's always something that can be shared that is of value. Maybe it's not everything, but there is always those value points which you mentioned. And what advice, you have a great LinkedIn presence. What advice would you give to other CEOs, specifically in your industry, looking to get started with their public presence online?
Yeah, I appreciate the compliment, Kimberly. I will say it is not something that comes perhaps natural for me. So it is at best a learned behavior. But the one thing, I always think about myself is, what do I like to consume? And I love to either read things that are talking about products or features or why, or equally like what's coming out and what's new. And I think and so as a result, like a lot of what I post or repost, right, or comment on are things to that ilk, right? Because I'm following them aggressively. And I think most importantly, I have some thought or opinion. This is true across a lot of our teammates here at Rancho, where they're posting or reposting specific areas in the industry or updates that they have. And that's great. I think for someone that's aspiring, right, to either build that presence or accelerate it, building off the kind of the key points where they have opinions are key. I have a lot of friends that have focused on either in industry updates or market maps, right? That was a big area for us, and a big focus area for us in some of my past lives. And so it's kind of wherever your strength is, wherever you're spending some time, build from that. And like all things, I think there's a momentum effect. And certainly for me, that's born itself true, right? As I start posting, you get more feedback, you get more requests or inquiries. It allows you to kind of iterate and start building out that flywheel. I'll admit, right, until that flywheel is built, I was just talking with a friend of mine recently about this, and he started a whole new Substack. And he was just like, man, it's tough building out content and only seeing, whatever, limited number of users, um, view or respond. But that's how it always is, right? And so, for anyone, right, and this is still a learning process for me too, right? So for anyone that's looking to build, right, start with the area that you know a lot about or have a lot of interest in, just iterate in small formats and grow and grow.
And I completely agree with what you said about getting started is the hardest part, especially with your friend with the Substack. So really love you sharing that example. And so to wrap up, Ryan, love to end with something more personal. What do you do outside of work to reset or gain perspective? You know, you're managing rancher, definitely must come with high demands. How do you have any tips for others and what's your routine?
Yeah, I've read online more and more about power routines, and I wish I could say that my routine ran as structured as some that are presented online, and alas, though, Kimberly, that would not be accurate. I think for me, I like a lot of people I work with, a lot of people on, a lot of rancher teammates, right? It's easy to go all in all the time, and then you look up and you go, man, it's Friday, and I haven't done a lot of other stuff. And like so for me, I'm a runner by nature, and so I love to block time early before anyone's up, or certainly before my kids are up, to get out and get some miles in. Because I think one of the things that is key, and again, this is a learned behavior, which I'm still desperately trying to learn and improve upon, is to take some space away, right, to recalibrate. So for me, and to reset one's mind, because after a while you just kind of you can burn too bright. So for me, running in the morning, and then I have two little kids, and so um, uh, even though sometimes I wish they would sleep in a little bit longer in the morning, anytime, right, where my wife and I can spend time either coaching their teams or just getting outdoors with them is an absolute B12 shot a lot. So those are, as time allows, those are the two main areas for me.
Well, I love that. Health and family are everything. So thank you for sharing that, Ryan. And thanks for being with us today. And until next time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.